Welcome everybody to What Would It Cost Florida. Your host Niels Decker, and today we have an awesome special guest, Jane F. Bolin. And it's even hard to do this introduction because you are a woman of many trades, a serial entrepreneur. So it's almost like, how do I intro you? But from your businesses, your real estate law, your title company, to having been a commissioner and the mayor, it goes on. So welcome, Jane.
Thanks for having me.
Jane, talk a little bit about when we, here it's different than when you talk about HOA and you talk about real estate law. Elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so Florida, well, first of all, in the United States, every single state is distinct. So everyone has their own real estate laws. And when you come to Florida, what you did in New York or in Wisconsin is not the same as Florida. So in the state of Florida, we have condominiums, HOAs, and cooperatives. Those are all considered common interest communities. Why common interest? Because you own a piece of that, right? But you have a common interest in generally what's called common interest element or property. But a condominium is not an HOA, and an HOA is not a cooperative. Mm-hmm. And so what's really important that anyone understand when they come to the state of Florida is that a condominium has its own separate statute, 718, and there are very distinct rules and regulations around how condominiums run. An HOA, which is generally thought of as a homeowners association single family home, also has a separate statute, 720, that dictates that. And then cooperatives do as well, which are 719. So it's really important. People call a condo an HOA and an HOA a condo. It's really one of the first questions I ask them is, are you in a condominium or are you in an HOA? Because, any response I give them really depends on that.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
And those are, maybe even let people know what areas those are common in, because it's an often topic that we discuss too, especially for foreigners that are not familiar, and
Right.
and probably even people from different states and how it's different here.
Yeah.
On Nooks, let's say we're talking about Miami-Dade or Broward or West Palm, or even on the west side
Sure.
of Florida, what that all looks like.
Yeah, so I think it's great. So you come to Florida, you throw a stone, you hit an HOA or a condo, okay? Yeah. So we have over 25,000 common interest communities throughout our state. It's actually rare to find what most people know as single family homes. Really rare. Yeah. There's a couple things that'll, if you're just driving through a neighborhood, you may see signage that says, "Welcome to the estates of Margate," or "Welcome to XYZ condominium." Yeah. So there's some giveaways, right? But just because there isn't a sign doesn't mean it's not an association. So it's really important. Any good real estate agent is going to make sure that that's listed. Why? Because there's a financial implication, right? Yeah. You're going to be paying dues either, monthly, quarterly, annually to an association. So I just think it's critical when you come in, you look at it and you say, okay, this is an association. And then to your point, right? Where is it located? So there's a city, there's a county, and there's a state. Yeah. And the state has laws, 718 and 20, which I mentioned before, that govern HOAs and condos. But then there's now county ordinance, and then there's also city ordinance. And that impacts you in maybe not exactly the association and how it operates, but it might impact you with short-term rentals. Yeah. Because there's local ordinances and county ordinances, certainly around the whole bed tax issue. And, then you think about it even larger, right? So there's, sort of federal law issues, right? Your ability to have emotional support animals or service animals. So there's all this interweaving that happens. But when you come to Florida, your number one question if you're getting into real estate is this in an association?
Yeah, if there's a gate or not. And if
Yes.
this could be an invisible gate.
That's right. No gate needed, no sign needed.
Very cool.
You need to find out for the facts, for sure.
And maybe speak a bit, this is so cool, the history of that and the structure. So you're speaking on federal, county, and foreigners and other areas in other countries sometimes talk about municipal. So they're talking about breaking down essentially the governance on smaller scale, larger to the national. What had that goal that way, or what's kind of the history around it? Because that's kind of neat to understand, because there seems to be some sort of advantages to it. There naturally are disadvantages, but maybe speak about that.
Sure. So I think specifically to your question,
Yeah.
right? In the United States, we have our framework is you've got the federal law,
Yeah.
you have state law, and then within states, you have counties and municipalities, which are also known as townships or cities, right? And they all interweave, and sometimes the federal law surpasses the state law.
Yep.
Sometimes a state surpasses a municipality. And then when you think about a condominium or HOA, now here's the wrinkle, right? So the condominium or HOA is also a not-for-profit business. And so they have what's called a declaration of covenants and restrictions, which is really just a fancy legal word to say there are rights and restrictions that run with the land that also interweave. So now you've got federal, state, county, municipal, and then the declaration, which for you and I, as people who purchase properties, that's the contract that we agreed to. Now, it's not the contract we signed as in the real estate transaction, but when you sign the real estate contract and you close on this home and you take it or this condominium, you're actually agreeing to this other contract that is recorded in the county in which your property is located. And that tells you the additional rules and regulations on how you can use your land.
Right.
So, not to make it sound complex, but there is a lot of layers to the cake, and you just want to be aware that is the case. So when you purchase a house here or a condominium in the state of Florida, you're going to be given something called FAQs, frequently asked questions. They're required by law.
Right.
They're required to give you a copy of the declaration, the bylaws, the articles of incorporation, and any amendments. I mean, the truth is mostly you're like, yeah, thank you for that.
Big stack of
Thanks for the
paper.
big stack of papers.
Yeah.
And I will look at that later.
Shove
Can
it.
I bring my cat?
Yeah.
That's really, you're only focused
Yeah.
on what you're focused on. That's okay.
Yeah.
But to be a really smart buyer, you got to understand that you're going to have those regulations. So I loved how you framed that question because there's so many layers to the cake.
Yeah, it's
And that's
so
just
cool.
the reality.
And you've seen this now, not just in you as a professional, and your companies have looked at this in different layers, but also as having been the commissioner and the mayor. Like, how was that experience? And having influence on how that went, and speak on that.
Sure. So in 2018, I ran for the City of Oakland Park Commission. I won that race. I became the mayor in 2020. Yes. And it was
COVID.
right in COVID. I was a COVID
Yeah.
mayor,
Yeah.
the mayor who never went to any events because we didn't have them. So funny enough, I say a couple things. One, being an association attorney working in real estate, it's like prepared me to be a commissioner because I have dealt with every problem and situation, neighbors not getting along, people not liking ordinances. I mean, I've dealt with that forever.
Yeah.
But in my role, we did pass short-term rental regulations, right? And so what was interesting for me professionally is that the cities have less power than the associations to actually regulate short-term rentals. So when you purchase in a condo or HOA in Florida, and you have some idea that you want to have it be an Airbnb, nothing wrong with that. But you need to know that you have the ability to do that because the association can actually regulate it in a better manner than the city. Why is that? Well, the state, some would say, usurped the rights of cities to regulate it in the manner that they would like to, right? So now most municipalities, just like the City of Oakland Park, has a registry. You pay a business tax. We can monitor your home for code compliance, but really dealing with the heart of the issue where you might have continuous occupants who are nuisances, etc., is actually much more effectively handled by an association. So it's sort of like it's an interesting twist.
Yeah, and also how that has evolved, and we see this now in different cities with Airbnb, how there's now licenses or there's limited amount of time that they can do it. Is this a principal property or not? Is this investment?
That's right.
And how that's so maybe this is so awesome. How has that evolved, let's say in this, where we are now in the Broward country?
Yeah.
County or in Miami-Dade or
Right.
West Palm or on the west side, what are some of the involvements?
So
that you
all
see?
the major counties have a registration process. Why? Because they look at short-term rentals as taking away from bed tax, right? So you're going to pay a registration fee, you're going to have to complete an application, and you're going to have to pay taxes on that. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a short-term rental. In fact, I own one in St. Martin County, and I pay my taxes every single month, and I complete my registration every year. And as long as you're doing that properly and you're being compliant, it's great. But that is, I think coming to Miami-Dade, Broward, West Palm, even on the West Coast, absolutely. If you're buying an investment property, before looking at the property, understand the uses of that property and understand whether you can do it. Because it's not just short-term rentals, there's also group homes. There's a lot of other, sort of nuances to that because, as society has evolved and grown, how we use our property has changed, but we still, I believe fundamentally, and I love being American and sovereign, that you have the right to exclude or include someone in your property. You have the right to use your property within the limitations of the law. And I think that's why you see the state of Florida, which is like a tourist destination, say, yes, we need to protect neighborhoods and communities, but we also really recognize this is a now driving force, right? So it's always a balance. Always a balance.
Yeah, very cool. So, and I think too, what you put it in there too, depending what county someone is. So for the listeners that are looking where they're going to be buying, the realtors will have that know all of what are those rules. And like you said too, is it a condo or a single family home, which, and on that single family home topic, how rare, because you mentioned in the beginning, which was interesting, how rare is it in certain areas and why? Is it almost excluded, or speak on that?
Yeah, well, I think you've seen more common interest communities, HOAs, and condos with development. So when you get on the beach and you think of condos, you think of the large, tall, that's all a development matter, right? Before there was development in the area, right, there were more single family homes that came along. So now when you see larger developers come and take undeveloped land and create communities, which are beautiful, they're always common interest communities. When you're in neighborhoods, Oakland Park, the reason I live in Oakland Park is there's very few condominiums or HOAs in Oakland Park. It was a distinct choice for me to want to live in a community where my neighbor could change their oil and not get a violation letter. So again, I think it's, to your point though, I just want to, you mentioned about the realtors. I believe realtors are excellent. We work with them. They are our professional friends. I also believe as a buyer, or you really need to look at use rights of property. You can ask the realtors, but they're not ultimately responsible for that, right? So in a residential setting, maybe a little bit more so, it's going to be handled at the title phase. You're going to learn. But, I see oftentimes with commercial uses, they put them out, people put them out for rent, and then you don't realize, well, I want to have a barber shop. Well, this is an industrial use area. You know what I'm saying? So I think in Florida, doesn't matter what county you're in, it's worth doing the due diligence to be clear about what your use of the property is going to be for, both in residential and commercial, and doing that homework and seeing if it matches. Don't rely on the MLS is what I'm saying, right? MLS is useful, very, very useful, but you can't rely on it.
And nothing worse than being contract deals funded and then you find out that you can't go the routes that you wanted to. So definitely so HOA in condos, HOA in gated communities, look out what the differences are. That's the big takeaway. It's huge. So, and it's come up, this conversation has come up many times, so this is awesome on the clarity on all of that.
Glad to bring that. One thing I would say for your listeners, especially around HOAs, right, like beautiful single family home neighborhoods, people love them. They look at them and they think, oh yeah, I could put in a pergola in the back, or I'm going to put in a basketball area for my child. Yeah, you need to understand that under the HOA setting under 720, they have architectural standards, guidelines, and they can enforce them.
And the grass needs to be cut to a certain height.
You bet.
You name it.
You
so
bet.
Very cool. Okay, amazing takeaways. I'm going to ask the what would it cost question, and what would it cost to live in an HOA association?
So the answer is that I don't know, but you need to find out. It's disclosed in the FAQ. But here's what I think your listeners really need to get. You can pay monthly, quarterly, or annually. It depends on what that declaration says. And when you get a budget, which you will get disclosed when you're seeking to purchase in a condo and HOA, you want to ask questions about special assessments. So right now in Florida, we had the unfortunate tragedy of Surfside, as you may remember. And it's really big in the news, talking about the increase in insurance prices and what that's doing to associations. And also, we have something called SB 40, which was a structural component bill that was passed last year by the legislature, which is currently being discussed right now. But here's the bottom line. We all know in my profession that association dues are going up. So the maintenance fees that you're going to pay, your special assessments are going to go up. So it almost feels like people don't understand that if you purchase in a condo and the current fees are $250, that you really need to be able to pay probably double, triple that, and a special assessment if necessary.
Yeah.
So, you know,
it's a huge topic too when we're talking about funding, that
Yes.
conversation gets overlooked more than once.
yes. And there's what is required to be disclosed by law. And then there's actually doing a little bit more due diligence. So let me give a hot tip to your listeners.
Love it.
You know, you ask what's in the FAQ, you look at the budget, but then what I would actually do is talk to people in the neighborhood. What's happening? See if you can see the meeting minutes. Are they planning to make any major changes? Ask about the insurance policies. Talk to people. Find out what you can hear on the street. And you know, you don't have a right to attend the board meeting, not as an owner, but you do have a right to ask the person selling to maybe get you more than what's required by law.
Yeah.
Because right now it is a bit of a crystal ball game. And the problem with Florida law, it's not a problem, but you're on the hook.
Yeah.
And it's what's called joint and several liability, previous owner, current owner. And so having gone through the crisis in '08, having seen people fall past due in assessments, I mean, we know that once you're past due, in the state of Florida, which our listeners may not know, we can foreclose on your home. So it's not just the mortgage company that can foreclose or the government for tax purposes. The associations can foreclose. And that is, I mean, we could do a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So good to know that it goes way beyond just what you think, who can foreclose, who's
That's
got
right.
the rights. And then also, you know, it's almost like, could you take the seller, let's have a dinner and let's do an interview questionnaire almost
Yes.
at that point. But, you know, find out ways, there's ways to get creative at that,
Sure.
to see how you can get the communication that will be crucial for you to be able to close with peace and no surprises.
That's right.
Yeah, very cool.
That's right.
Speak about, so what would it cost, you know, we're talking about real estate law and we're talking about the title company.
Yeah.
What would it cost to have your services?
Yeah. So for Peyton Bolin, the real estate law firm, we bill hourly, right? And we bill against a retainer, which is very common practice for associations. But what we also do is we have flat fees. So if you go to peytonbolin.com, we have an actual shop where you can get a half an hour consultation for $150. You can get a lease review. I mean, we have a whole bunch of flat fee services under real estate, which are really excellent. And I don't know a lot of attorneys that do that. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. Also on the Janelle title side, you know, we're really clear. We're sort of a no junk fees situation. We charge $750 for the actual closing plus the title insurance. Title insurance is statutory. I mean, everybody charges the same thing. What's different is the fee add-ons, but we don't have what I would call the junk fees, wire fees, filing fees, storage fees. Yeah, administration fees. So we don't do that. We're really clear, cut and dry. And we do, you know, when we work with our real estate professionals and folks, you know, there are ways to discuss that. So I would say when you think about what does it cost, you know, flat fees for Peyton Bolin, come talk to us from the Janelle title side, but we're always very upfront about
I love
that.
it, and it screams you. It's a no nonsense, and this is what you get, and that's how you are. I love it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so PeytonBolin.com, JanelleTitle.com, Jane F. Bolin on Instagram, Jane F. Bolin on Instagram and in LinkedIn. But yeah, if you look me up, Jane F. Bolin, there's one Jane Bolin from 1920. She's the first African-American judge from New York. Pretty amazing. I am honored that she's my namesake. That's not me. The other Jane F. Bolin you can find it's in the city of, from the city of Oakland Park and with Peyton Bolin or Janelle title.
I love it. Amazing. Well, a pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fun. And thank you for listening today, everyone out there. This was What Would It Cost Florida. Until next time.